Welcome to The Explainer. So, you're looking for a detailed, easy to understand breakdown of global history from 1300 to 1700 to help you absolutely crush your exams? Well, you are in the right place. We've got about 30 minutes to build a comprehensive, high yield mental map of centuries of massive cultural shifts. By the time we're done here, you'll have a complete timeline of this era, perfectly tailored to help you ace your tests. But first, just think about this absolute grand mystery for a second. How on earth did a fragmented, collapsed Europe, which was, essentially just a bunch of isolated warring tribes after the fall of Rome, suddenly wake up and trigger a chain reaction that connected and completely changed the entire globe? It is literally one of the greatest domino effects in human history. And getting a solid grip on how one event toppled right into the next, that's exactly what examiners are looking for. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the domino effect we're going to uncover today. We'll start with the fallen feudalism, move into church power in the Crusades, hit the Renaissance awakening, set sail with the voyages of discovery, and finally, look at the global collisions. Now, right before we tip that first domino, let's lock down a really crucial concept that examiners love for those one-mark questions: the transcontinental empire. Basically, this is an empire that rules over land spanning more than one continent. Think the Roman, Arab, or the massive Mongol empires. Actually, a great memory trick for these early major empires is the acronym CREAM: China, Rome, Egypt, Assyria, Morea. Just keep in mind, while empires like Egypt and Morea were strictly continental, empires like Rome and the Arabs spilled over borders to become truly transcontinental. Grasping this really helps you understand why the world after 1300 got so incredibly connected. All right, Section 1, the fall and feudalism. So by the 5th century, the Roman Empire in the West had completely fallen apart. And since there wasn't a strong central Roman government anymore, local strongmen essentially just took over, and they built what we call the feudal pyramid. This was a very strict top-down system, all based on land and loyalty. To memorize this hierarchy for your exams, just use the mnemonic KVALS. That's king, right up at the very top; vassals, the big powerful lords right beneath him; a lord of the manor below them; and serfs or peasants down at the very bottom. So the king granted land downwards, and in return, loyalty, military service, and labor flowed right back up the pyramid. Okay, listen up, because here is a massive examiner's secret. Do not throw away easy marks by confusing a serf with a vassal. It happens all the time. A serf starts with S, so think soil. These were poor farmers tied to the land who handed over goods and labor just to get physical protection. A vassal, on the other hand, starts with V. Think very powerful lord. They pledged their absolute loyalty directly to the king in exchange for huge chunks of land. Make sure you keep those two totally separate in your head. Moving right along, let's check out the second major power player in medieval Europe, Section 2, church power and the Crusades. Now, what's really wild about this image is that it is absolute, undeniable proof of just how incredibly powerful the Catholic Church was back then. I mean, they were rivaling the kings. To remember exactly what they controlled, use the mnemonic POLS. The papacy owned land and led scholarship. They weren't just running Sunday Mass, They owned massive, sprawling estates. They guided people's everyday behavior with the promise of a better afterlife, and their monasteries were literally the ultimate centers for learning and preserving books. And it was exactly that immense religious power that sparked the Crusades. Now, the Crusades were these massive military campaigns by European kings meant to recapture holy places from Muslims. But here is the trick to scoring full marks on your essays. You absolutely have to mention the economic result. The Crusades were kind of like students sneaking out to buy food outside the school gates. It unintentionally created this huge new market. By marching east, European knights completely by accident reopened these massive Mediterranean trade routes, which ended up bringing wealth and crazy new ideas back to a previously isolated Europe. Which perfectly triggers our third domino, Section 3, the Renaissance awakening. By the 14th century, all that new wealth from Mediterranean trade had totally rewired European mindsets. Let's break down exactly how this builds, step by step, because this is the exact cause and effect chain that examiners are hunting for in those 5-mark essay questions. Step 1. Italian port cities, places like Venice and Genoa, get seriously rich from trade. Step 2. This sparks a massive boom in local wealth. Step 3, suddenly you've got these rich merchants who start funding artists, scientists, and thinkers. And step 4, boom, the Renaissance, which literally translates to rebirth, officially begins. Just look at this magnificent, totally over-the-top symbol of that extreme trading wealth. And because they had all this money flowing in, people kind of stopped hyper-focusing solely on religion and the afterlife. Instead, they woke up to humanism, to art, to science, and just the physical world right in front of them. They started wondering, hey, what else is out there? And honestly, when people start wondering what else is out there, what do? They go explore. Welcome to Section 4, Voyages of Discovery. That intense Renaissance curiosity, mixed with this desperate, driving demand for Indian spices, pushed European explorers straight into the unknown oceans. Okay, you need to absolutely burn this timeline into your memory for the exam. In 1492, Columbus sails west and hits the West Indies, the Caribbean. Then, in 1498, Vasco da Gama sails east, goes all the way around Africa, and actually reaches Calicut, India. If you need a quick memory trick, C comes before V in the alphabet, right? And 92 comes before 98, so Columbus, 1492. Vasco, 1498. Now, here is another massive examiner secret and a total trap you need to avoid in multiple choice questions. Never, ever confuse these two explorers or where they ended up. Columbus sailed west, completely missed India, and landed in the Americas. Vasco da Gama sailed east, hugged the tip of Africa, and actually made it to India. Keep their routes and their final destinations completely separate in your notes, for sure. So, what exactly happens when these European ships finally drove anchor on distant shores? Well, that brings us to our final and definitely most impactful domino. Section 5, the global collisions. So, the really crucial point you need to understand here is that these encounters were not just one-sided. They were deeply, deeply mixed. To write a balanced full-mark answer on your exam, you're going to want to use the mnemonic HWDM 90. H is for Hassan al-Wazan, a scholar who wrote Africa's first geography for the Pope. W is for Will Adams, an Englishman who actually advised a Japanese shogun. D is for Dona Marina, who acted as a key interpreter for the Spanish in Mexico. And M is for muskets, which Japan traded for and eagerly adopted. These all show curiosity and cooperation, right? But then, there's the 90. 90%. You absolutely must include this stark reality in your exams. In certain parts of the Americas, over 90% of the indigenous populations died. And this wasn't just happening by the sword, okay? It was primarily driven by European diseases like smallpox, which these populations had absolutely no immunity to. It was a catastrophic demographic collapse. It completely reshaped the Americas, and tragically, it led directly to the horrific transatlantic slave trade to replace that lost labor. Now, while Europe was going through all these massive transformations, it is vital to remember that the rest of the world wasn't just sitting still on pause. These simultaneous global events are huge targets for exams. For instance, over in Africa in 1442, the Portuguese began the slave trade. In Asia by 1644, Manchu rule kicked off in China. And in South Asia, right in 1600, the British East India Company was founded. Basically, history is happening everywhere, all at once. Which actually brings up a really fascinating point that gets tested a lot in higher order thinking questions. If you look at standard textbook timelines, the column for Australia often looks totally empty before Europeans arrived. But does that mean nothing happened? Absolutely not. Australian Aboriginal history is incredibly rich and complex. It just wasn't recorded using written European-style dates. It was recorded via this amazing art and deep oral traditions. A lack of written dates does not mean a lack of history, guys. It just means the history was stored differently. Which leaves us with a final thought to kind of chew on today. If foreign ships suddenly arrived on your shores tomorrow, bringing crazy new technologies, totally different languages, and all sorts of unknown challenges, what history would you record? Would you write about their distant kings, or would you focus on the immediate, earth-shattering changes to your own world? Really understanding that kind of historical perspective is the absolute key to mastering this entire subject. You are now fully armed with the structure, the mnemonics, and those insider examiner secrets to completely conquer this era. Keep reviewing these concepts, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.